Hi there everybody and welcome. My name is Robin Norgren. I am an artist and an art teacher, and I am here today to show you how to create a painting inspired by the artist Pete Cromer. If you're not familiar with Pete Cromer, I'd like to show you a few of his drawings. They are very whimsical, very happy. It's the style of art that I really am drawn to, is this happy, vibrant, colorful art. And so in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how to create something inspired by Pete Cromer. Now, what I have on hand is a variety of materials, but you can use whatever you have on hand. So for right now, I'm actually working on a piece of 9x12 butcher paper. You could use cardboard from your cereal boxes. You could use your brown paper bags from grocery stores. And while you may not initially think that is a great idea to create your art on, I promise you what it brings to your paintings and drawings automatically is a textured look that you can then play around with and really be inspired with what's going on in between the texture you see on your paper. So you can also use a canvas or any sort of type of white paper, but for this lesson I'm going to be using this type of paper. On my art table, I have different colors that I'm inspired by right now of acrylic paint. This is the Apple Barrel brand. There's also a Craft Smart brand. All of these can be found at your local craft store or maybe even your local Walmart if you have one around. I have stencils of different sizes and shapes, and I may or may not use those, and you really don't need those as well. And if you are one that actually collects scrap paper and always feels the need to hold onto the scraps, this particular painting that you're going to create will actually lend itself to using all those scraps that you might have on hand. So if you have that available, go ahead and get those right now. Come back and we will get started. I also have watercolor paints, and I have oil pastels. You can easily use crayons if you have those in a pinch. So you can make this as easy or as detailed as possible. Either way, I promise you, you're going to have an amazing experience playing in the paint. Come on back soon and we'll get started. All right, so let's begin painting in the style of Pete Cromer. I'm going to remind you of the style that his art, he does lots of animals. This is like a toucan or a parrot, that style of bird. But as you can see from the whimsical look of these drawings, you actually can create any style of animal that you want and then create on top of it. Now I am going to create in the style that he is creating there. So just for the sake of seeing it on your monitor or phone, however you're experiencing this video, I'm going to use marker. You do not have to do that. So I'm just going to start with just a basic shape here. And I may or may not have wanted to go up that high, but I'm going to work with what I have here. I'm going to add a beak because I find that when you add the beak, it actually helps to create the space for you. So if you see the beak is right here, it kind of lends itself as to where you're going to put the eye and anything else you're going to add to the bird. So I'm going to add an eye, and then I'm going to add the shapes that you saw around the bird's head, just to give me a sense of where I might want to go with this. So right now I've created this on the paper, and believe it or not, even though I'm using brown paper, I'm actually now going to take white paint and I'm going to wash it throughout the whole painting, just to give some detail to the painting that might not necessarily have been there if I just do it in a paint by number style where I've drawn it and then I'm just going to add all the colors to it. So what I'm attempting to do is I'm adding this white because white is considered a neutral, and then the anything I put on it, from the crayon to the watercolor paint to just regular acrylic paint, is going to work alongside that white paint and give me a different look than what I might be experiencing once I'm just painting it solely on its own. So again, if it makes you a little nervous to do this, you don't have to necessarily do it. To be honest, it makes me a little nervous sometimes when I do things like this, but I really do trust the process because it's more about discovery and less for me about getting an actual carbon copy of maybe something that I'm inspired by when I'm creating a painting. So I've put this on the back side, and as you can see, I already can see that this is kind of allowing me, if I wanted to change the shape of the bird, right? Because as you can see, I can see where I put the marker, but I wasn't too terribly happy about how high I went. So if I wanted to now, I can change that out and it really won't do harm to what it is I'm trying to create. So I've now made it smaller, and I can choose to add this back in just to give me an idea of where I want to go, or I don't have to. So I'm adding in the beak again and adding in the eye. And so here we are with the base. And so from here, if you're deciding to use anything like your scraps of paper or any sort of stencil, this might be the time to look through what it is that you have and decide what you might want to use. So for example, if I'm using the stencils, I have a couple of fun stencils here that I could add into it. Now again, you don't have to do this, but it might be something you're interested in doing. Now what I would suggest is, if you want to add that in as details, I would first use the base of whatever color you're going to do and paint the bird right now. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I had been going back and forth between a kiwi color and a laguna color for the base of what the body was going to be, and I also have a Spanish olive. And I think what I'm going to do is, I'm most drawn right now to the laguna, so I'm going to take that, and then you make your decisions as well. And I'm going to start to paint not too much of it, but just enough where you will be able to tell by the end of it that that was the main color that I wanted on my painting. So I'm just adding that in. And why I want to do that, if you've ever used anything like a stencil before and you get that perfect look from your stencil, the last thing you want to do is to go around that area again with the paint that you want to use, because you will end up, you know, bleeding into that stencil, and then, you know, the very thing you maybe loved about your painting is now gone because you you covered it or accidentally. So here I am now, and as you can see, it's starting to bring the bird to life. So I'm putting this laguna color on. I'm not filling it all the way in. I'm allowing the white paint to also be a part of what I say is the conversation on the page between the paint and the paper. I'm going to put a little bit in here because it's always very helpful to have the paint, the color, your main dominant color, in they say 2 to 3 different places, just so that it just brings the whole painting together when you do that. All right, so here I am. I'm going to put a little bit more down here at the bottom. I will let this be our stopping point. So we're going to let this dry, and we're going to make our choices about whether or not we want to use scrapbook paper or we want to use the stencil, and that's what we'll work on in our next segment. All right, so as this is beginning to dry, I want to show you again the originals of the Pete Cromer paintings. And as you can see, the dominating color for the eye, the pupil, is that black color. But then there's this larger circle that you can play along with to give a little more interest to the face, right? And so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take my scrapbook paper and I'm going to pick a piece of scrapbook paper that might lend itself to that pop of color. So here I have a couple of different choices here. I have a green, which again, I'm gravitating to the green lately in a lot of my paintings. I have this really bright pink with it's polka dots on it. And so I'm going back and forth to how much of a pop that I want to have here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, and then also let me show you another detail that you might be interested in seeing. Do you see how there's kind of a cutoff here in the shape of the face to give it a little more, I guess, a dividing space for where the top and the part of the painting ends with the face. So if I put that right here where you can see it, here's your drawing right here. And then what you could do is you could take a pencil. I'm going to do it with a pencil because I don't want that marker to show through. And you just want to give yourself a sense of, this is kind of my stopping point for my bird, right? So it's just giving it a horizon line of sorts so that you know maybe this is the brighter and then this is the less dominant in the two parts of the face, or vice versa. Same thing with the nose, noticing where your eye is. So with me, I might need to go up a little bit higher with the eye and then add the beak a little bit higher. Now, in the paintings that you see by Pete Cromer, he actually seems to be using some sort of a piece of paper with it as the nose, as opposed to drawing it in. So that might be something to consider. So now let's say you've done this and you've already added in your painting these details, and with me, because I'm using a marker, you don't necessarily want it to influence what you're doing next. You can go ahead and take some white paint and just brush in the areas that you want to make sure are not a part of your painting conversation. And I actually have a little bit of the Laguna left on my brush. And so look at how lovely that is, just kind of blending that blue in. So it's not so much white and then blue. It really lets itself naturally show up on the painting. Okay. So now I've added in that dividing line and I've moved up my eye. So I can decide at this point whether or not I want to put backing on the eye, and I do want to do that. So I'm going to use the scrapbook paper and I'm going to cut the shape that I am interested in adding on. And so I'm actually not going to use scissors. I'm going to make it a more organic shape. Now again, use the scissors if you're more comfortable with that, but I really do love having more of the organic look. And so as you can see, when I cut my paper, or I should say tear my paper, it automatically gives me the white background that I want around it. And I really love that. So again, whatever glue source you're using, you can go ahead and glue that onto your painting. Now what's helpful again is because I already have a sense of where I want the eye. So I'm going to put this in the space right near the eye. Okay. And then I'm going to draw the eye in where I want it. So I'm going to take my white paint and I'm going to first draw you know, really at this point going, this is where I want, I'm putting my line in the sand here. This is where I want the eye to be, right? And so if I have anything left over, I'm just going to paint over it. And then within that circle, I'm going to make the ultimate commitment and color it in. So I'm using the black marker to color it in. You can choose to use your black paint, or you can even make the eye a different color. All right, so this is where we are now. So right away, you can see that brings the whole painting to life, right? And I hope you're pleased with what you're seeing at this point. I'm gonna then take another piece of what should I do that? I think what I'm gonna do instead is I'm going to use my green paint and actually add a little bit of white. And I'm going to commit to, this is where I want the nose to be and the color of the nose. Okay. And then if I wanted to, if I want to get rid of that blue, that line, my black line around the whole thing, I'm going to then come back around. I'm actually using a blend of the blue and the green, so it looks a bit more natural. And I'm going around the whole space. Again, this is a stylized choice for me. You may not want to do that with yours. But again, it's taking all the little details and allowing them to blend together so that it's pleasing to the eye. And let's face it, ultimately it has to be pleasing to your eye first. It doesn't necessarily have to be pleasing to anybody else's eye. All right, so there we are. So there is the details for the eyes and the beak. I might want to put a little bit around, kind of remembering my desire to want these to blend in. See if that looks, I may or may not change it back. But there it is for right now. And so when we come back, we're going to work a little more on the body, and then we're going to add in the feather details. So come on back whenever this is dry for you. All right, my friends, welcome back. And we're going to start now with the next step where we're going to add a wing to our bird. And we're also going to play a little bit with a stencil, because I did mention a stencil option and I want to show you how I would approach stenciling. So again, let's take a look at the Pete Cromer Bird. And do you notice that there is a wing, and it's a very stylized wing. So if you're comfortable just cutting it out on your own, go ahead and do that. Or you can trace it out. Here's my way. I really like going organic with it, because then I can get a sense of my own individuality of how I want to create what it is that I see. So I have picked this vintage looking flower as the inspiration for the wing. And then where I'm going to add it would be about right here. Okay, almost looks like the letter E, right? All right, so that's where I'm going to glue it. But before I do that, I want to take a little moment to talk about if you decided to do something like a stencil. So I would probably say, because we're working with so many colors, you don't want to get too busy with the stencils. But if you have a nice stencil that you want to give a shot at trying, and of course you can always paint over everything. I also have these cool little number stencils, or I could just use portions of it. As you can see, that really does mimic a a wing as well. So I could do that if I wanted to. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stencil right here. And I'm going to create maybe a mixture. Because again, from the paintings that we're looking at, you notice it's not too overtly obvious when he's making those color changes. So I think I'm going to go with more of a light blue, and I'm going to put it here below. So remember we had that line below to kind of distinguish between the two. So this does help us to know that below this line, we want to add a little more detail because this is a lot of blue going on here. So you actually do have a couple different options. Let's go back a little bit. If you want, you can take a different color and paint below this if you want to. I think my answer is going to be I'm going to use different stenciling techniques, and that will cause that break in the line to show up a little more. So here I am, I've made kind of like a light blue color, and I'm going to just pick different places where I'm going to dapple in with my stencil. So again, it does not have to be too perfect. It doesn't have to match the actual shape that you're working with. It's just going to give some interest to what you're seeing here on your bird. So let me put a pin there so you can see it better. And so as you can see right away, this is starting to awaken that bottom half of the bird's body. So I can do the same thing again in the front, and I can use a different color. So I'm going back to the green, and again, just picking random places, being very intuitive about what it is that I'm doing. I went a little high on that one. But again, when you do this, when you just kind of trust your instinct of where to go with it, rather than going 3 over here, 4 over here, it really does start to become, even though we're inspired by Pete Cromer, it's your interpretation of how you would create a bird like this. Okay, so now we've got that stencil down there. We're going back to, if you've created the wing, where would you put the wing? So it could be a little bit above that line, or it could be below the line. In his drawing, it is right at about that line there, as you can see. And then look at the shoulder part there for the wing. You can also either mimic that either with paint, or if you have, again, different stencil or different scrapbook pages that you are interested in using. So again, I have this brown color. So I'm going to create a shoulder, just basically creating like a mountain and then adding it to the page about right here. And again, you're looking at how high or how low that would be. So if you've put the shoulder right there, and then your wing is about here, and then looking to see if all those colors look good to your eye. So if you're pleased with it, and then also you could go a little wider with the wing if you wanted to. So let's say, for example, maybe you didn't want to go as high, but maybe you wanted to go wider. Here's another example. So this is, again, because it's your painting, you decide what looks pleasing to your eye. So you could either go lower and wider, and then have the feather sticking up or the wings sticking up like that. So I'm going to go ahead and choose actually the wider. Even as I cut it, I thought, oh, I think that looks better to me. Okay. Now, again, even though your the paper that you're using is a darker or a lighter color, you can always feel free to go over the top of it with your paint. Okay, so there's my wing. I'm just using a good old glue stick. I would probably use different glue. I just didn't put it on my art table this morning. All right, so then I'm going to add some more glue in here. Just make sure it stays on. And then for me, I like to kind of let things sit and then come back with fresh eyes. And so I'm going to stop the video here and then have you come back whenever you're ready, and we'll continue on. Welcome back, and right now let's continue on creating in the style of Pete Cromer and creating in the way that makes this your own. And so again, I'm back with my scrapbook paper, and let me give you another peek. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little more here by the eye, and then I'm going to start to think about how I'm going to add those feathers to the edge. So I'm using a piece of scrapbook paper, and again, what I'm trying to use is paper that can, it has subtleties in its color choices, but they're different, right? So I've picked this piece of almost a dusty rose vintage color to go along with this vintage flower, but then there's also that pop of pink. So you can see how it's starting to bring it all together. And so as we come over here to the feathers, we've already started with using that base of a color. And so then I would invite you to decide whether or not you want to use stencils, or if you want to use paper to add into that so it blends it together, where it's not paper and then paint and then stencils. You really want to go, okay, I've put everything in that I want to put in. Now, how am I going to draw this thing all together? So there's a couple ways. You could use the same paper you used right here, or even right here, or right here. The pink might be interesting for me to use. And so I might consider doing at least a few pieces of that. But notice this is more of a swirling color and a swirling shape, I should say. So what you want to do is, if you want to kind of warm up, you know, where you're going with this, maybe you want to take a little more of your paint and kind of swirl in the direction that you want these feathers to go. Right, so here I'm coming in, and what's great about this is now the paint from before has really, it's dried, it's really blended in with whatever it is, type paper that you've used. And so now you're just coming back around and you're just massaging that color a little bit, right? So I have some going one way, some going another way. If you'd prefer not to see all of that background, I would then just say take your paintbrush and just paint over the tops of those areas. So I will do that a little bit so you can see it from my end. So if I take a little bit of the white paint and just kind of come around this way. So again, I'm kind of mimicking where I'm going to go with the feathers, but I'm also taking out some of the black so it's just not so prominent there. And then this is also the time, if there were some places when you were brushing the background that you want to maybe add in some more white, if you're using the brown paper background that I'm using, maybe this is the time to come in again. And again, because part of it has dried already, it's going to start to give you a little texture to your painting. And you'll see levels and layers in the white rather than it being a full white background. Okay. All right, and then you can feel free to also blend in a little of the color. As you've seen, I've done that a little bit as well. Okay, so there I am. And so now I'm going to start with, I think I've decided to use some of the brown that I used on the shoulder. A little bit of the brown and a little bit of the pink. And so again, you can do it a couple different ways. You can go ahead and just free cut, kind of a, yeah, just cut organically, make the organic shapes of it, or you can draw it out first and then cut it. So again, I'm going to start to add that now into my drawing. Okay. And if you like the stencil that you or if you like the shape that you cut out, you can also use this as a stencil to cut out more of those shapes. I'm going to need to go back in and make that stick a little bit more. So let me show you this again. Okay. And again, you can experiment. Maybe cut out other the shapes, similar shapes from the other scrapbook pages that you've used, and see if you like the look of it being in your painting. Right? So I'm going to put that there just to see if I like it. I'm not going to glue it down completely. As you can see, I didn't glue down the other one completely because I want to see how this is going to look aesthetically as I add in the details. So I'm going to see if I can put that right on top. See if I like it better that way. And then from there, I can come back with my paintbrush and again, add in maybe a dominant color. Just kind of mimicking what it is that I have already there. So don't be afraid to experiment with it. Things can be taken off. You can paint over these things. There's no wrong way to do this. This is really about how it feels when you're doing it and also how it feels when you're done. One very big thing I want to say is please don't throw it away. If you're in that space, which everyone can get into from time to time, where you don't like what you see, let it sit for a while. Let everything marinate together and see what you think. So now what I like to do is I like to come back in after I'm done with what I've drawn. And I do like to take either a thin Sharpie or like a ballpoint pen and bring it together with my, with that pen, with that line, making the line that actually makes everything pop. Now this might not be your preference, so you don't necessarily have to do it, but I do tend to do this in my paintings, just because I just feel like it gives a little more definition to it. Okay. And even in the, on the scrapbook paper, I will go around. Now you could choose to leave the stencils not drawn around, or you can go around just a few of them. And then when you step back, you can see whether or not you want to add more, either in the feathers or in the bird. So even as I'm doing that, I really would like a little more definition in the feathers on the bird. Okay. I'm also going to put a little more paint in there. Feel free to paint on top of your paper, the scrapbook paper. All right. I'm always a proponent of putting your painting on a wall and seeing what you think with it on the wall, as opposed to looking at it down on your desk or wherever you're just choosing to paint, because I really do think you get a better perspective when it's up on a wall, which is where art should be in the first place. All right, well, I really hope that you enjoyed this drawing class with me, and I would love to see what it is you've created. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you again for being a part of my community. My name is Robin Norgren. I am the owner of Josie's Art School. I'm an artist and an art teacher. You can find all the work that I do and all the classes that I teach under Robin Norgren or under Josie's Art School. So make sure and Google that. And as always, I really do appreciate you coming and creating with me. Creating is something that I think inspires me as well as others to lean in, know ourselves better, and in that way become change agents in the world. So I'm so glad you're a part of this community. Bye.